You talked about learning to learn and that model. Now that you're a handful of months out and you're working as a contractor to a certain extent, uh, like what are some of those tried and true skills that you've carried through from even dating back to your prior career path, then through the program and into today? Is it that same stuff of just having a really strong sense of, like needing to get from A to B and that drive to kind of find and finish that objective? Or what are some of those other skills that may have come up for you that you can really identify as being beneficial throughout this entire journey you've gone through?
Honestly, a lot of the soft skills, being able to, network, being able to, hey, I don't know this, and having an open mind and going to, hey, I don't know, can you help me or can you point me in the direction? That's been huge. I feel like asking for help when you don't know is one of the biggest things that I learned along the way. Because not only do you have to fight like your own ego stuff, but the reality is too is if you get so stuck down a rabbit hole, you can waste your time, you can waste a client's time. Whereas obviously you don't want to, anytime you stumble or hit a roadblock, stop. But finding the life skills that brought me to the point of where is that balance between figuring it out on my own and asking for help was a big one. Um,
Hmm.
that's a lot of that, but as well as just the troubleshooting, it's very process oriented. Everything I've done is very process oriented, like, hey, we're here, there is that A to B, but not necessarily always being all over the map, but following a path, so that way you're checking the boxes, not doing things two, three times, and being efficient about it while still being able to learn along the way.
I find that is such an important life skill in general, especially with programming. I think back at the times early on, especially when, I would interact with a computer and I felt like the thing had a mind of its own and it was doing its thing and it was like, oh, it just has an opinion right now that's going to do one thing over another. And then getting into software development, realizing it doesn't exactly work that way. They're not
Yeah.
that smart. There is an actual causal reason why something does or doesn't work right now. Um,
Hmm.
and so like there's an aspect of that that is very resonant for me now. And kind of like you, I would get the question a lot about what are some of the skills I gained as an actor that have pulled
Hmm.
through even to this day and through software and marketing and all that stuff. And there's definitely a few fundamentals there that have held true. And I'm very glad and proud that I had that history because I
Yeah.
do feel like it had made me better in what I'm doing today. And even throughout all the stages moving backwards in time. So, is there? I want to hone in for a minute on some of the harder choices
Hmm.
to make that kind of leap, because I know you talked about being in the army at one point in time, and you mentioned that you have a child, and so I'm just curious about what were the hard parts that sort of held you back from maybe either making the decision sooner or the times in which you were, enough is enough and I'm going to make the choice. What were those things that you were really working and grappling with? What was that stuff?
Absolutely. So it's actually something I've given a good amount of thought to, because I really, really, it was something I struggled with, was because I'm a single dad with two kids full time. Like, income was a huge one. It's not a cheap, thing to make that jump, where I'm going to devote myself wholly to this, this career path for a minimum of 4 months and not do anything outside of that. So that was a massive one. Always, wanting to make sure I could provide for my kids and do that, but also somewhat being unhappy with where I was at in my previous careers. Like, I wanted there, this was the route I had spent years kind of coming to. This is where I want to be. But then, like, I was talking about in 2019, like, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. And it took me about, 3 years to get to the point where it's like, this is the time. There is never going to be the perfect time. I could wait decades. I could die of old age before it becomes the perfect time to take the jump. So I just kind of came to that conclusion where, like, I did the best I could to prepare for it. I'm going to hope that I can get it all figured out and just make the leap. And that's how I ended up in Alpha 2023.
That's awesome. Well, I applaud you for sure, for all the reasons. One, for picking learn, but more importantly, for betting on yourself,
I
because
appreciate
that
that.
is the hardest. Yeah, that's the hardest bet to take for sure.
It is. It is. I would
Now,
never change. Looking back, I would never change it. But man, some of those times going through, it's like, am I making the right choice? But on the back end, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
do you identify as a risk taker in that way, or are you risk averse? Like, where do you land on that spectrum?
It's funny because there are some things where people look at me like you are just an absolute, adrenaline junkie. You're looking for this, but when it comes to like my family and like making sure they're taken care of, I am very risk averse because I'm like I want to make sure that they are taken care of always, no matter what. Just like I was a bomb tech when I was, a single guy with no kids and had kids. I'm like, all right, let's reevaluate what I'm doing with my life right now. So playing with
Right.
explosive as a profession is probably not the best. So. Um, I do tend to take those risks, but I as I'm getting older and having more experience, I definitely try to weigh them out with counterbalance it a little bit with some knowledge and experience as well.